Somehow it just feels wrong to wish you a good morning, considering today's thoughts, because some things are going very wrong. At a time of year when we should be looking back with satisfaction on the delights of the holiday season and with plans and resolutions for the new year. But instead, there's fear on our streets, in the TTC, and at the malls because of the random violence that has been growing and growing. How do we explain three 13-year-olds, three 14-year-olds, and two 16-year-old girls stomping and stabbing a 59-year-old man to death over a Mickey of whiskey? What possible justification can there be for a man with a criminal record charged with assaulting an officer while in possession of a gun, while having 2 lifetime gun possession bans and an outstanding arrest warrant, be free to shoot a police officer lured to the site of his execution? Shootings, stabbings, home invasions, random violence that is unpredictable and impossible to avoid. Stories abound of horrors. A woman dying after being set on fire, a car used as a weapon to run down pedestrians, being pushed onto the subway tracks, beatings, stabbings, the murders of strangers. Horrendous enough, the assault between those who know each other, the domestic violence, the gang wars, and crimes done for financial gain. But the unknown, the reasonless, the stranger on stranger, it seems incomprehensible. Assaults and crimes without rhyme or reason. Can anything be more fright-provoking? We hear the police chiefs begging the government to keep violent criminals off the streets, to put the public safety over compassion for the hard luck stories of the criminals, to keep those committing violent crimes away from the public, to enforce bail conditions, to confiscate bail when abused, to arrest and jail those caught committing crimes with weapons, particularly those using guns, or those smuggling guns across the borders for the criminals. And at the same time, we ban police from our schools and do nothing to improve the relations between those who are sworn to serve and protect and those who treat them as the enemy. We hear how culture, education, or lack thereof, history, family, abuse, trauma, are to blame, not the perpetrators. The cry goes out to fix the housing, educational system, the prejudices that lead children to gangs and acting out. But we don't debate and discuss these matters for fear of offending and misspeaking. There are issues and there are excuses. Issues need to be dealt with, and excuses need to come face to face with realities. And the reality is that excuses have been utilized to invalidate the values that made our communities and our country great, made us envied by people worldwide. The values of truth and honesty and accepting responsibility for one's own actions have been replaced with embracing victimhood for the abuser. Mother didn't love him. Dad had left home. He was picked on for his name, his neighborhood, poverty, color, nationality, sexual preference, health issues, language, clothes. You name it, everyone can find something to blame for all their failings and misbehaviors. The response of the general public, the ordinary folk who don't commit crimes, don't assault others, and pay for what they have, has been mixed. On one hand, afraid to care and speak out, for fear of the consequences of being on the wrong side of the woke folk. People have remained silent. Too many have retreated to their homes, doors locked and bolted, and committed to maintaining COVID restrictions to protect themselves against guns and violence rather than viruses. And the longer they remain isolated, the more fearsome it becomes to leave their own fortress and wander the streets of our city. Far too many have retreated to their own interests, families, and worries. Afraid of those things which they cannot control, they turn their backs on the concerns of others. And the result is that the world becomes more isolated and a tiny bit scarier with each individual's retreat. Ignoring the realities of the streets and complaining only about wars in distant places and the lack of civil liberties in distant lands is not the same as standing up and speaking out about things that affect you and demanding change from those who can actually make those changes. Christians are called upon to be creative participants in the world, to care for others, particularly the poor, the sick, and the needy. And these are the very people who are most vulnerable, most at risk to the growing violence in our city, where evil patrols the streets. But we feel vulnerable when we do that. After all, no one is going to be upset when you march from Queen's Park to City Hall in support of the call for woman, life, freedom for Iran, or showing support for Ukraine by adding a sticker to your bumper, or writing a check to the Red Cross for the victims of the winter's storms. But organizing a Take Back the Streets march, well, that draws attention, and possibly from the wrong people. Writing an opinion piece for the local paper demanding that politicians act for the victims, not the villains, feels dangerous. But what's the alternative? Living in fear, adding another lock to your door, dreading the dark, avoiding other people, arming yourself with a pocket knife, or keeping a baseball bat by your bed? And what message are we sending when we retreat in fear? We're making it clear that we're prepared to turn our city over to the criminal element. We are waving the white flag. We are teaching the next generation to accept fear as the determinant in their lives. The reality is that until we are willing to walk all the streets of our city, there is no safe street. Until we talk to strangers and trust our neighbor, no one can trust us. Until we speak out against injustice, bad behavior, and cruelty, there's no way our city can return to being Toronto the Good. We need to care and act and speak out. We cannot allow the downhill trend of violence and armed criminals on the streets to continue. We have to reclaim our streets and our community. Our safety and that of those we love depends on us. This isn't how I expected to be thinking at the start of a new year, but it's the reality of our new year. And if we want this year to end on a higher note, there's no time to waste. Our Parliament, our Justice Department, and our judges and courts must act. Reoffending violent offenders need to be denied bail. Those with unlicensed guns must be detained. Those who repeatedly beat others do not belong on the streets. And justice must be swift and sure, not dragged on for years. The goals of punishment and rehabilitation are commendable, but the priority must be the right of innocent victims to be protected from criminals who have demonstrated their lack of compassion and commitment to reoffending. We must demand that those who represent us commit to the needs of a civilized society to have safe streets and subways and schools. Burying our heads in the sands will only ensure that there will be more burying of innocence, not the outcome that any of us can countenance. Things have gone awry. No one will fix it if we don't, because it takes everybody working together, demanding together, and marching together to bring about the kind of city, the kind of world that we all desire. My prayer is that you will heed the call and defend all that is good and right. So may it be. Amen. Well, on a positive note, working together, it is possible to turn things around. Remember, Jesus and a handful of disciples changed the world. Committed citizens can surely turn around misguided policies and lack of support for police and victims and justice. Can we count you among their numbers?